Second, the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we heard of the tragic death of a young man on the Bibby Stockholm. I know the whole House will want to send our deepest condolences to his family and friends. We must never let this happen again. I would also like to mark the retirement of my colleague and friend, Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales. Mark committed his life to public service and lives his values every day. Quietly and patiently, Mark has been a titan of Labour and Welsh politics, and we thank him for his service and wish him well. Mr. Speaker, Christmas is a time of peace on earth and goodwill to all. Has anyone told the Tory party?
Mr. Speaker, Christmas is also a time for families, and under the Conservatives we do have a record number of them, Mr. Speaker, to this point, at the beginning of the year I set out some priorities that this government would deliver for the British people, and over the course of this year we have, Mr. Speaker, inflation halved, Mr. Speaker, the economy growing, debt falling, action on the longest waiters, the boats down by a third, and crucially, as we heard from Honourable Friend, tax cuts coming to help working families in the new year.
Mr. Speaker, he can spin it all he likes, but the whole country can see that yet again the Tory party is in meltdown and everyone else is paying the price. Now, he's kicked the can down the road. But in the last week, his MPs have said of him, he's not capable enough, he's inexperienced, he's arrogant, a really bad politician. When they're shouting, this is what they said. So, well, come on. Who was it who said he's a really bad politician? Hands up. They're shouting. Well, what about inexperienced? Who was that? Or, and now there's got to be some hands for this, he's got to go. Oh, shy. Apparently, he's holding a Christmas party next week.
Order. It's Christmas. No, but you might not want the Christmas present that I could give you. So please, Keir Starmer.
Apparently, he's holding a Christmas party next week. How's the invite list looking?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for all the comments. What I would say to him, he should hear what they have to say about him, Mr. Speaker.
Right. Do you want to be the first one? Because it is Christmas and I'm going to hear it. My constituents are going to have a Christmas like everyone else. They want to know how their Christmas is going to be affected. So I want less of it from all sides. Keir Starmer.
Speaker, they've obviously found the donkey for their nativity. The search of three wise men may take a little longer. But while they fight amongst themselves, there's a country out here that isn't being governed, where more than 100,000 people are paying hundreds more a month on their mortgages, energy bills going back up in January, the economy shrinking again, NHS waiting lists an all-time high. Doesn't he think the government would be better off fixing the messes they've already made rather than scrambling to create new ones?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about governing and spent the first two questions talking about political tittle-tattle, Mr. Speaker. What a joke. Well, let's get on to the substance, Mr. Speaker. Let's get on to the substance. He mentioned the things. What is the news that we've just heard in the last week? Well, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is education, Mr. Speaker, because that's how we spread opportunity in our country. And what have we learned? Where are the schools performing best in the United Kingdom? In England, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the reforms of this Conservative government, rising up the league tables, giving our kids the start they need. And where are they plummeting down? In Labour-run Wales.
He talks about children. Nearly 140,000 children are going to be homeless this Christmas. That is more than ever before. That's a shocking state of affairs, and it should shame this government. Instead of more social housing, house building is set to collapse. Instead of banning no-fault evictions, thousands of families are at risk of homelessness. Rather than indulging his backbenchers swanning around in their factions and their star chambers, pretending to be members of the mafia, when's he going to get a grip and focus on the country?
Let's just look at the facts. Let's look at the facts, actually, because rough sleeping in this country is down by 35%, Mr. Speaker, since its peak, thanks to the efforts of this government. There are hundreds of thousands of fewer children in poverty today, thanks to this government, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to home building, again, what are you doing? We just had the data this last week. In the last year, an almost record number of new homes delivered, Mr. Speaker, more than in any year of the last Labour government.
140,000 children homeless this Christmas, and he's utterly tone deaf. And the rise in homelessness shows how these Tory crises merge and grow and damage the country. Families like the Bradys in Wiltshire, both parents working full-time, with 2 young children, forced out of their home of 15 years by a no-fault eviction, now living in their van. Or 11-year-old Liam Walker, homeless this Christmas. He wrote a letter to Santa saying, "Please, can I have a forever home? I don't want any new toys. I just want all my old toys out of storage. I just want us to be happy again." Is there anything that could shame this government into putting the country first, then it's surely this little boy.
Mr. Speaker, if he really cared about building homes, if he really cared about building homes, when there was an opportunity in this House, Mr. Speaker, in this House, to back our plans to reform defective EU laws, to unlock 100,000 new homes, Mr. Speaker, what did he do? What did he do? He went in front of the cameras and said one thing and came in here and blocked it. Typical shameless opportunism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. He hasn't finished. As the world's...
One more.
Mr. Speaker, is that really his Christmas message to Liam? Cocooned in his party management breakfast. He just can't see the...
Order. Mr. Cleverly, please. It's Christmas. I want a little bit of silence. And I'm going to get it one way or another. And that goes to each side. Keir Starmer.
Cocooned in his party management breakfast, he just can't see the country in front of him and what they've done. I'll finish by thanking hard-working families across Britain who kept our country going. It's been an impossibly difficult year for so many. I want to pay special tribute to our key workers, particularly those in the emergency services and those serving abroad in our forces, who even at this time of year are doing the vital work of protecting their country. I wish everyone, including the members opposite, a very happy and peaceful New Year. Will the Prime Minister join me?
Prime Minister.
I think, Mr. Speaker, he missed that I paid tribute to our emergency workers at the beginning of the session, Mr. Speaker. But let's see, because I think it is important, because he talked about working families. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I want to make sure that we support working families, and that's what we're actually delivering, Mr. Speaker, because all he has to offer them is borrowing £28 billion a year. Which all it will do is push up their mortgage rates and push up their taxes. Meanwhile, what have we done? Delivered tax cuts for millions of working families, boosted the national living wage, Mr. Speaker, recruited 50,000 more nurses, 20,000 more police officers, improved our schools. We've cut the cost of net zero for those working families. We've cut the boat crossings by a third and we've halved inflation. And that's the difference, Mr. Speaker. We're getting on and delivering for working Britain.
Debates that shape the nation, now in your language.
SNP leader Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister please share his Christmas message for children being bombed in Gaza this winter?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, nobody wants to see this conflict go on for a moment longer than necessary. We urgently need more humanitarian pauses to get all the hostages out and to get life-saving aid into Gaza to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. And we have been consistent that we support what is a sustainable ceasefire, which means Hamas must stop launching rockets into Israel and release all the hostages.
Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, if the current actions of the Israeli government continue, then it is estimated that almost 1,400 more children will die between now and Christmas Day. Now, in the United Nations last night, our friends and allies in France, in Ireland, in Canada, in Spain and in Australia, they joined with 148 other nations to vote with courage, care and compassion for a ceasefire. The UK, they shamefully abstained. How can the Prime Minister possibly explain why 153 nations are wrong, yet Westminster is right?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said consistently, we're deeply concerned about the devastating impact of the fighting in Gaza on the civilian population. Too many people have lost their lives already, and this is something that we've stressed, and I've stressed personally to Prime Minister Netanyahu just last week. And what we are doing practically is to get more aid into Gaza, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Secretary is appointing a UK humanitarian coordinator, and in my conversations last week with Prime Minister Netanyahu, I pressed him on opening up the Kerem Shalom crossing so that more aid can flow in, and we're actively exploring the opportunity for maritime corridors, something that the UK is well placed to lead, and I can give him my assurance that we will work night and day to get more aid to those who desperately need it.
Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A rogue company has walked away from 13,000 tonnes of hazardous waste in Lancaster, and it's now been on fire for 10 days. There are plumes of smoke covering our city. Lancaster City Council has been left to pick up the tab, and to date they've spent £262,000. Without government support and intervention, this fire will burn for several months. So will the Prime Minister support my local council with swift government support?
Can I thank the Honourable Member for raising this incredibly important question? I know she's been working alongside my Honourable friend, the member for Morecambe, on this. And can I also thank the emergency services in her constituency? And my understanding is that Lancaster City Council, the Environment Agency and the UK HSA and emergency services are working together to ensure that the health risks and environmental consequences are minimised. But I will ensure that the relevant minister understands the absolute urgency of the issue that she's raised, and I'll make sure that she meets with them as soon as possible.
Jerome Mayhew.
Mr. Speaker, some dental practices are taking advantage of post-COVID demand to take their NHS practices private, earning more money but leaving behind those most in need. Training a dentist cost constituents in Broadland more than £300,000. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that if a dentist accepts public funding in order to qualify, they should be asked to commit to NHS dentistry for a number of years before going private?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes an excellent point, and we are investing £3 billion into dentistry. The dentistry contract with the NHS was reformed last year to improve access for patients, and around half of all treatment were delivered to non-paying adults and children. The number of adults seen has gone up by 10%, the number of children by 15%, but my honourable friend is right, and more needs to be done, and that's why the government will be bringing forward the dentistry recovery plan in due course.
Marsha de Cordova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are 12 days until Christmas, and hundreds of families in Battersea will be worried. Not about being able to buy gifts for children, but whether they can afford food and heat for their homes due to the Tories' cost of living crisis. Over 4,300 emergency food supplies were provided in Battersea by the Wandsworth Food Bank this year, and they have told me that they are bracing for the worst winter yet. So what is the Prime Minister doing to ensure families do not go cold and hungry this Christmas?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we care deeply about making sure those who are most vulnerable in our society get the support that they need through the winter. That's why We increased welfare by record amounts earlier this year. We supplemented that with cost of living payments of £900 for the most vulnerable. It's why we supported those with energy bills who need our help the most. Pensioners in her constituency and elsewhere will receive up to £300 alongside their winter fuel payment. And indeed, that support lasts not just through the winter, but into next year, because we're deeply committed to helping those who need it, and this government has got a track record of delivering that help.
It's Boris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is rightly focused on taking long-term decisions to improve the lives of people in this country. So can I make a suggestion? Our mental health legislation is 40 years old, and we made a manifesto commitment in 2017 and 2019 to reform the Mental Health Act, because we have people with learning disabilities and autism sectioned under the Act being kept on inappropriate accommodation for long periods. We have people sectioned under that Act not receiving the compassionate care that they deserve and in a sense are criminalised. And we have people sectioned under that Act who have their mental health condition re-stigmatised by the act of sectioning. So would the Prime Minister, in the absence of a bill in the King's Speech, would the Prime Minister agree to meet with me and other like-minded colleagues to discuss how we might be able to take forward reform of the Mental Health Act, because it simply isn't fit for the 21st century?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this important issue. He's absolutely right about the work that needs to be done, and I'm grateful to the Joint Committee on the draft Mental Health Bill, and our intention is, when parliamentary time allows, to bring forward a bill. I'd be happy to meet with him and colleagues to discuss this, but also just remind everyone that we are undertaking the largest expansion of mental health services in a generation, £2.3 billion of extra funding by March of next year, increasing capital investment in mental health urgent care centres, and under the long-term workforce plan, the largest expansion of the mental health workforce that we've ever seen in this country.
Christopher Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what's worse? Losing your WhatsApp messages as a tech pro, losing £11.8 billion to fraud as Chancellor, presiding over the biggest fall in living standards in our history, or desperately clinging on to power when you become even more unpopular than Boris Johnson?
Mr. Speaker, what matters to me is delivering for the British people, and that's exactly what we're doing.
I don't, Theresa Villiers.
Given the appalling reports of sexual violence committed by Hamas on the 7th of October and the risk that hostages could have this treatment inflicted on them as well, will he raise this issue in international fora so the international community demands strongly humanitarian access to hostages in Gaza?
Mr. Speaker, the reports of sexual violence perpetrated by Hamas are deeply shocking. We've raised our concerns with the United Nations a fortnight or so ago, and we are engaging with the Israeli government to consider what further support we can take. And more broadly, we continue to do everything that we can to ensure that all hostages can return safely to their families, including those British hostages and those with links to the UK. And she can rest assured that I and the Foreign Secretary are working tirelessly to bring about their safe return.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
Debates that shape the nation, now in your language.